Well, it's time to see what's making the headlines with the Daily Express columnist and broadcaster Carole Malone and the political editor of the Liverpool Echo, Thorp. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, nothing to stop another police killer like Cousins. The Times leads with the release of the inquiry into the murder of Sarah Everard that's recommended an overhaul in policing. Russian President Vladimir Putin's threat to use nuclear weapons over the West's support for Ukraine is on the front of the Financial Times. Meanwhile, the Telegraph suggests Russia is deliberately flooding Europe with migrants to destabilise the continent. The Guardian's front page has reports that more than 100 Palestinians were killed in an incident involving Israeli forces and an aid convoy, with both sides giving different accounts of what happened. The Eye has a story about next week's budget, reporting a 2% tax cut is now in doubt due to bad economic forecasts. The Daily Express carries a warning from the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, that current immigration levels cannot go on or Britain will become unrecognisable. Britain's broken borders is the Daily Mail's headline on the just-published Home Office reports into immigration. The Metro dedicates its front page to the hairy biker star Dave Myers, who's died at the age of 66. As does the Daily Star, with the tribute, "My best friend is on a journey that, for now, I can't follow." And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Carole Malone and Thorp. Welcome again to both of you. Let's start with the case of Wayne Cousins. The report has been published now, and the chairwoman, well, this is a quote on the front page, "Nothing to stop another police killer like Cousins." Extremely depressing, Liam.
Incredibly depressing, incredibly shocking, incredibly scary, I think, those words from Lady Angelini. You know, the number of failures across 3 different police forces to stop this man from being allowed to become a police officer at all and do the heinous crimes that we saw him do is staggering, to be honest. And when you look through the report at the number of red flags, the number of warning signs that were there, you know, I mean, I'd say I'd go far beyond red flags. You know, he's been reported to police 8 times for indecent exposure. How on earth does that not stop you being a police officer and become recognised for the criminal that you are? You know, this isn't just about a criminal who was, you know, getting away with it. This is about a criminal who was getting away with it and then became a police officer. He had a gun, he had handcuffs, and we know from the harrowing details of the Sarah Everard case that he used that position as a police officer to do what he did, which is one, you know, amongst the most horrific crimes we've ever heard. It's a grotesque failure across policing in general, and I think it's going to take a long, long time and an enormous amount of change for people to regain that trust in the police. And as Lady Angelini says, you know, this needs to be done now. This can't be kind of moving at the kind of pace that it is now. I saw a member of the Greater London Authority speaking before, saying she still doesn't think that the police quite get the scale of this, the scale of change that's needed, the pace of change that's needed, and it needs to be wholesale reform if people are ever going to trust in their police again.
And Carole, the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak saying this evening that the police absolutely do need to regain the trust of the public.
Absolutely. I think it's going to take a long time before that happens. But what struck me today was Sarah's mum making the statement today. It's very rare that she has said anything since the murder of her daughter. In fact, I'm not entirely sure she has. But I was thinking about her today, watching her, and she said, my daughter would still be alive if he hadn't been a cop, because she would never have got into a stranger's car. But I think you know, it's bad enough having your child murdered. It's impossible to get over, but what is entirely impossible to come to terms with, that she could still be alive if there hadn't been these catastrophic failures to stop him. And I think I would say now that, you know, having, you know, read stuff from this report, that a lot of the people who allowed him to get away with it. I want to know if they're still in the police force. This guy's nickname was the rapist, for God's sake, you know, and he had lots of colleagues. You know, I have a lot of time. I think the cops get a hard time on lots of stuff, and a lot of them work very hard, and a lot of them are very good and decent. However, the ones that knew this was happening and that stood by and did nothing when they knew he was the one exposing themselves, they saw he was part of a WhatsApp group, for goodness sake, that was sending porn to each other. They heard the way he spoke about women. What kind of coppers are they if they are still in position? They shouldn't be. They should be rooted out because they are part of the problem. They are what the Lady Eilish is talking about. They are.
But do you think that's indicative of a culture?
Yes,
or are they just
absolutely.
some bad apples?
No, I think that's indicative of a culture. You know, he was in 3 separate police forces, people who witnessed this kind of behaviour from him, and no one did anything. You know, there were police forces who, it was flagged up that he had exposed himself somewhere and the car reg matched his. They dismissed it without ever even talking to him.
In the days before the murder as well.
They
4
never
days
even
before.
spoke to him. So Sarah Everard would still be alive today if some of his colleagues had spoken up and had this guy chucked off the force. But there seems to me to have been a reluctance on the part, not just of his colleagues, but of bosses in these police forces who knew about his reputation and still they did nothing. I think Lady Eilish described some of the investigations as lethargic, inadequate. I'd go much farther than that. They weren't just inadequate. They were entirely incompetent and cruel, you know. It's being careless with women's lives. You know, how little do you think of women when you can hear a guy like this talk about them in the way he did in the police station? And so bad were his crimes. They nicknamed him the rapist, his own colleagues.
Liam, also on the front page of The Guardian, and also that assertion that he should never have been a policeman in the first place.
No, and as Carole says, you know, I think Sarah's family are right in what they say, that if he hadn't been a police officer, this would not have happened. I think what you say as well, Gillian, about the wider cultural issues, you know, this is just one of the reports from this inquiry. There's going to be 2 more. One is going to look at wider cultural issues. One is going to look at the case of David Carrick, which is another absolutely hideous case. We also see up in Scotland, of course, there's an investigation going on into failures that have happened there. It's a widespread thing. I don't think we can kind of use this few bad apples line anymore. It's a cultural issue that
But the problem is this reflects on all the good cops as well, and that is what I think is the shame here. You know, I know for a fact now, if I get stopped by a male police car for anything, I will not get into the car. He's going to have to drag me in by the hair because I will not do it. And I think I'm probably one of millions of women who will be saying, we won't do it. And that means that we have lost trust. And you know, Lady Eilish talks about building that trust back up.
Yeah,
when's
that is the trust that Rishi Sunak also says needs to be reclaimed. Let's move on to the Financial Times and this warning, stark warning from Vladimir Putin, to NATO countries. Liam.
Yes, well, Vladimir Putin has been making a sort of State of the Nation, extremely long, laborious address, as he likes to do. Of course, there's an election coming up soon. Not that there's any sort of legitimacy to that, and obviously he will win by an enormous amount. He's been a little bit jostled by some comments by the French President Emmanuel Macron, who mentioned in passing the idea of sort of NATO troops supporting the mission, the defence of Ukraine on the ground. Now, I should say this was quickly sort of rebutted by the UK, by the US, by Germany, who I think were quite nervous about it. But nonetheless, it's ruffled the feathers of Putin, who has, as he often does, has come out with these kind of threats about nuclear attacks, and he's saying that he could attack Western targets. It comes at a difficult time in the Baltic region as well, because the Baltic leaders are sort of calling for more shows of strength in the NATO countries because of the military operations gathering on their borders. So it obviously massively increased tensions in the region. You've got the situation with Sweden and Finland joining NATO as well. So it's no longer just about Ukraine. Putin is looking at his other borders and where he sees his threats coming from. Obviously, a lot of this is rhetoric. He wants to kind of keep the Russian people on side, because this, of course, if you remember, he was confident that he could, this special military operation that we would refer to as a horrific invasion, that, he would have taken Kiev in a matter of days. It's been 2 years. Yeah. It's gruelling. It's going on. And he wants to keep the Russian people on side. So he has to sort of show this kind of macho strength. But obviously, it's it's still pretty scary stuff to hear him say, even if we can take it for the sort of threats that it is.
And we remember that in the beginning he, wasn't referring to it as a war at all, and everybody was banned from referring to it.
Still doesn't, a special military operation, but we all know exactly what it is.
Just because of time, Carole, let's move on to the Express. 1.4 million granted UK visas last year. Suella Braverman is commenting on this. She's not at all happy.
No, she's not. And I mean, she's... She's trying to destabilise Rishi, and this is the perfect area and subject on which to do it. She's saying, but in many ways, what she says has some credence because, I think last year it was 700,000 people we granted visas to from everywhere, and we can't keep doing it at that rate. And because it's not just the people who come to work here or come to study here, they bring their families too. So the numbers are rocketing, and we can't. We have a massive housing shortage in this country currently, and this is costing it's just costing a fortune. So yeah, I mean, and Suella's not going to let up. Everything that she was saying would come to pass when she was Home Secretary, she's not going to let that go. And the closer the election comes, the more she's going to ram this home to people, because she wants people to think, if I'd been there, this wouldn't be happening, which is not necessarily the case.
I would point out that she was the Home Secretary as well. This was in her purview, and she never really got a handle on it.
Point well made. We're going to have to leave it there because we are running out of time. We shall continue discussions after the break. Coming up, obesity is now a greater threat to global health than hunger. That's in the Telegraph. We'll be discussing that next. Just stay with us. Just want to bring you some breaking news, and that is on President Michael D. Higgins. We were previously reporting that he'd been taken to hospital as a precautionary measure, having felt unwell. The update is that he will remain in hospital overnight. He is in excellent spirits, we're told, and has thanked the medical staff for the care that he's received. So no immediate concerns have been identified, but the decision was taken that in order to undergo some further tests, he will stay in hospital, but is in excellent spirits. We'll, of course, keep you updated on that story as soon as we get any further information. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, Carole Malone and Liam Thorp. Going to take a look in this section. Quite a surprising story. Front page of the Daily Telegraph. Obesity has overtaken hunger as the biggest threat to global health. Carole?
Yeah, I mean, quite astonishing, really. And the UK on that list, we are number 78 on that list out of 200 countries in the world in terms of obesity. But it's interesting because they're saying that, both obesity and being thin are, they're both forms of malnutrition. So being too thin is a form of malnutrition, being too fat is a form of malnutrition, because in both cases, you're not eating what you should be eating, so you're not getting nourishment or the vitamins. And it's saying the children are, and it's interesting that this has been a study being covered by a global team led by people at Imperial College here, and it's saying the children are paying the price for our inaction on obesity. Under 18s, globally, 159 million of them are obese. So it's incredible, isn't it, that, this is to do with, we live now compared to, 50 years ago in a land of plenty, and we live in a time when there's, junk food probably overtakes the consumption, junk or processed overtakes the consumption of good food for many people for all sorts of reasons, a lot of them being financial. But another interesting fact is that the number of women who are obese has doubled since 1990, just 1990. It's incredible. But it's the children that worry me more than anything, because they're not the ones who are in control of their own weight. They don't go out and do the shopping. They're not the ones who feed themselves. Their parents feed them. And that I think is worrying, that, we're going to get to a situation where kids are dying before their parents because of obesity-related diseases. And I think part of the problem in this country, We are frightened to talk about obesity now. We're frightened to talk about it to the people who are obese in case it upsets them. Well, you know, compare upsetting them than with them getting, you know, diseases like heart disease, like lung disease, like diabetes, all the things. You know, we've got to be prepared to tell people truth about what obesity means and what it means for your life.
And in this article, the Director General of the World Health Organization is calling on the food industry to play their part to tackle the obesity crisis.
People have to too.
Liam, take us into the Metro and the passing of Dave Myers at the age of 66, the hairy biker.
Really, really sad. Yes, Dave Myers, one half of the very famous and much-loved duo, the Hairy Bikers, who I think sort of defined that kind of heartwarming type of television, that really comforting TV, you know, and I think also a real healthy depiction of male friendship as well. Just, you know, two guys who clearly loved being in each other's company and kind of won the hearts of the nation through their cooking, through their travels, through their camaraderie. We'd actually, sort of interestingly, in the last few days, the Liverpool Echo been doing a bit of reporting on the Hairy Bikers, because in their most recent TV show, they visited Liverpool and went to a number of Scouse institutions for various different delights. And everyone who met them said how lovely they were, just how wonderful it was to have them there.
That
and
really
then
came across.
Suddenly we were, you know, today, then just suddenly hit with this news. And I think it was, I know obviously he'd been unwell, but I still think it was quite a big shock for people. And you see the quote from Si there, and it's just really beautiful, isn't it?
Yes, my best friend's on a journey that for now I can't follow. I must leave it there.
Very moving.
Thank you both.